I found out my husband has been pretending to go to work for 6 months after being fired. What he's really been doing changed our marriage forever. I, 35F, never thought I'd be sharing something like this on Reddit, but after everything that's happened, I need perspective from people who aren't emotionally invested in our lives. This is a story about lies, trust, and how sometimes the worst moments in your marriage can lead to unexpected transformations. My husband and I have been married for 8 years. We met in our late 20s, both focused on our careers, both believing we'd found someone who shared our values and vision for the future. He worked in corporate finance, I'm in healthcare administration, and together we built what I thought was a solid life. Nice house in the suburbs, regular date nights, plans to start a family soon. The whole American dream package. The first hint that something was off came about 7 months ago. My husband's company had announced some restructuring, but he assured me his position was secure. He'd been there for 12 years, had consistently positive reviews, and had just landed a major client the previous quarter. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? He'd never given me a reason not to trust him. Looking back, I can see the changes started small. He stopped sharing specific details about his workday. Before, he'd tell me about meetings, projects, office politics, normal workplace stuff. But suddenly his answers became vague. Oh, the usual. Just meetings and emails. When I'd press for details, he'd quickly turn the conversation to my day instead. Then came the schedule changes. For years, he'd worked late most nights, often not home until 7 or 8 p.m. Suddenly, he was walking through the door at exactly 5:30 p.m. every day. When I commented on it, he said they'd implemented new policies about work-life balance. It sounded plausible. Lots of companies were doing that post-pandemic. But something felt off about his explanation. The money issues started subtly too. We've always kept a joint account for household expenses while maintaining separate accounts for personal spending. I noticed he'd stopped using his credit card for lunch expenses, saying he was trying to use cash more to control spending. Again, it seemed reasonable. But then I noticed regular ATM withdrawals from our joint account during what should have been his office hours. The breaking point came when I got a call from our bank's fraud department. They wanted to verify some unusual transaction patterns. Multiple withdrawals, all made between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., all from ATMs nowhere near his office. When I pulled up our account history, my stomach dropped. Over 6 months, nearly $40,000 had been withdrawn in increments of $500 to $1,000. I spent that night lying awake, my mind spinning through possibilities. Gambling? An affair? Legal troubles? Every scenario seemed worse than the last. I thought about confronting him immediately, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was a desire to understand the full scope of whatever was happening. Either way, I decided to do some investigating first. The next morning after he left for work, I followed him. I felt horrible doing it, like I was starring in some cheap detective show. But I needed to know the truth. He drove in the opposite direction from his office, eventually pulling into a strip mall about 20 minutes from our house. The space he entered looked semi-vacant, with generic office blinds covering the windows. I parked where I could see the entrance and waited. Over the next few hours, I watched various people come and go. Most were dressed professionally, carrying laptops or portfolios. Around noon, my husband emerged with 2 others, and they walked to a nearby cafe. They sat outside, and even from my car, I could see them reviewing documents, gesturing animatedly as they talked. This continued all day. He'd move between the office space and various local businesses, always with different people, always looking engaged in serious discussion. At 5 p.m., he packed up, got in his car, and drove home. Arriving at his usual 5:30 p.m., just like every other day for the past 6 months. That evening, I barely touched my dinner. He was telling me about some fictional presentation to the board when I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out my phone, showed him a photo I'd taken of him at the cafe, and asked quietly, "What's really going on?" The change in his demeanor was instant. The confident facade crumpled. He pushed his plate away, put his head in his hands, and sat in silence for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "I was laid off," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 months ago, during the restructuring. They gave me a decent severance package, but..." He trailed off, struggling to continue. I waited, my heart pounding. After another long pause, he started talking again, the words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. He'd been one of 60 people let go, despite his recent successes. The severance package included 6 months of salary, but finding a comparable position in corporate finance was proving difficult. Many companies were downsizing their finance departments, automating positions, or hiring younger, cheaper employees. But that wasn't the whole story. Not even close. During his first month of unemployment, he'd started meeting regularly with other laid-off executives at a local coffee shop. What began as informal networking and job hunting support evolved into something else. They started noticing a pattern. Small businesses in the area were struggling, many on the verge of collapse, but couldn't afford traditional consulting services. That's when they had their idea. They could use their corporate experience to help these smaller businesses survive and grow, offering their services at reduced rates. The empty strip mall office? Rented at a steep discount because the building was scheduled for renovation in a year. The withdrawals? Initial capital for business licenses, basic office supplies, and a small reserve fund. I have everything documented, he said, pulling out his laptop. Every withdrawal, every expense, every client contract. We've been operating legally, paying taxes. I couldn't tell you at first because I thought it would be a short-term thing until I found another corporate job. But then we started actually helping people, making a difference. Small businesses that were about to close are now turning profits. We're helping them negotiate better contracts, streamline operations, find funding. He showed me their client files. A family-owned restaurant that was nearly bankrupt, but now had a 2-month waiting list for reservations. A local cleaning service that had doubled its business. A small manufacturing company that had secured its first major contract. The money I withdrew, he continued. Most of it is still here. He pulled up another account statement. I've been so terrified of failing that I've barely touched it. We've been running the business on minimal expenses, working mostly on commission from successful outcomes. I sat there, trying to process everything. The lies hurt. 6 months of daily deception was no small thing. But I was also seeing something in him I hadn't seen in years. Passion. Purpose. The corporate job had paid well, but it had also been slowly suffocating him. This new venture, despite its uncertain future, had brought him back to life. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, though I was starting to understand. At first, because I was ashamed, he admitted. I was the primary breadwinner. It was part of my identity, how I saw myself as a husband. Then, as the business idea developed, I was afraid you'd think it was too risky. That you'd want me to take another soul-crushing corporate job because it was safer. I kept telling myself I just needed a little more time to prove it could work. We talked through the night. About fear and pride, and the roles we'd unconsciously adopted in our marriage. About dreams we'd both set aside in pursuit of security. About trust and partnership, and what those words really mean. He showed me their business plan, their growth projections, their client testimonials. They weren't getting rich, but they were making a difference. And slowly they were building a reputation. Word of mouth was bringing new clients every week. The next day, I called in sick to work. We had more to discuss, and 8 years of marriage deserved more than one night of honest conversation. He took me to meet his business partners. 2 women and 3 men, all former corporate executives who'd found themselves at similar crossroads. They shared their vision for the company, their successes and failures, their hopes for the future. I saw their workspace, met some of their clients. The restaurant owner who hugged my husband, telling me how he'd saved their family business. The young entrepreneur whose eyes lit up while describing how their guidance had helped her navigate her first major expansion. The next few weeks were a period of adjustment. We set up proper business accounts, transferred the remaining money back to our joint account. I helped them create a more professional website, leveraging contacts from my healthcare network to find potential clients in medical practices and small clinics. We also started couples counseling. The lies had damaged our foundation, and we needed help rebuilding trust. Our counselor helped us understand how traditional gender roles and societal expectations had contributed to the situation. How my husband's fear of losing my respect had led to deception. How my own focus on stability had perhaps made it harder for him to share his dreams. 3 months have passed since my discovery. The business is growing steadily. They've moved to a better office space, hired an administrative assistant, and are looking to bring on more advisors to handle the increasing client load. My husband works longer hours now than he did in his corporate job, but they're different hours. When he comes home tired, it's a satisfied tired. We're different too. The crisis forced us to reevaluate everything. Our communication, our expectations, our dreams. We've learned that support doesn't always mean encouragement to stay safe. Sometimes it means believing in someone's vision, even when it's risky. Sometimes it means letting go of who you thought you were supposed to be, so you can become who you really are. I won't pretend everything is perfect. Trust is still a work in progress. Sometimes I still wake up at night and check his phone or email, even though he's given me complete access to all the business accounts. He still sometimes hesitates before sharing difficulties or doubts, falling back into old patterns of trying to protect me from worry. But we're growing, both as individuals and as a couple. We've started having weekly dream sessions where we talk about our hopes for the future. Not just financial goals, but personal ones too. I've started taking classes in healthcare management, pursuing a promotion I'd been hesitant to consider before. He's mentoring young entrepreneurs in his spare time, finding joy in helping others avoid the corporate burnout he experienced. Last week, I attended their first official client appreciation event. Watching my husband give a speech about their company's mission, seeing the room full of successful small business owners who'd benefited from their guidance, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in what he's built, lingering hurt from the deception, hope for our future, and a deeper understanding of how sometimes the worst moments in a marriage can lead to unexpected transformations. For those wondering about the money, yes, we've implemented much stricter financial transparency. All business transactions now go through proper business accounts. We have monthly meetings to review both personal and business finances. Trust isn't just about believing in someone's good intentions. It's about creating systems that support honesty and openness. Looking back, I understand why he felt trapped. Society puts enormous pressure on men to be providers, to never show weakness or uncertainty. My husband chose deception over vulnerability, and that was wrong. But his mistake led us to confront deeper issues in our marriage and in ourselves. If there's advice I can offer others from this experience, it's this. The scariest conversations are often the most important ones. Fear of losing someone's respect can drive us to do things that ultimately damage that respect far more than honesty would have. And sometimes what looks like an ending is really a beginning in disguise. Our marriage isn't the same as it was 6 months ago. It's different. Stronger in some ways, more cautious in others. We're more conscious of our patterns, more intentional in our communication. We've learned that real partnership means supporting each other through changes and challenges, even when those challenges come from within the relationship itself. The future is less certain than it once seemed, but maybe that's not a bad thing. We're writing our own story now, not following a predetermined script. And while I never would have chosen this path, I'm grateful for where it's leading us.